There's a generation that built the internet and never posts on it, that raised themselves, fixed things with their hands, and never asked anyone for help. That watched their parents' marriages fall apart and their parents' companies hand out mass layoffs and quietly decided the only thing you can actually count on is yourself. They were born between 1965 and 1980, and most people have completely forgotten they exist. While the world obsesses over boomers and Gen Z, Generation X has been in the background, keeping everything running. No complaints, no personal brand, no drama. But here's what's worth understanding. The psychology that makes them invisible is the same psychology that makes them extraordinary. It started with a key around a child's neck, and an empty house, and the moment an 8-year-old realized for the first time, that no one was coming. Let me show you what that does to a person. It's a Tuesday afternoon in 1978. School just ended. A child walks home alone, pulls a key from around their neck, and lets themselves into an empty house. No parent at the door, no after-school program, no one to ask how the day went. They put their backpack down, look in the fridge, figure out dinner, and sit down to do their homework. Alone, in the quiet. No GPS, no check-in text, no safety net. That was not an unusual childhood for Gen X. It was just Tuesday. Researchers at the time estimated that around 7 million American children between the ages of 5 and 13 regularly came home to an unsupervised house. They were called latchkey kids, named after the house key they wore around their neck like a badge they never asked for. And what happened inside those empty houses shaped an entire generation in ways we're still unpacking today. When you grow up without a buffer, you learn something fast. Every action has a direct consequence. There's no one to soften the landing, no one to intercept the mistake before it costs you something. Psychologists call this a high contingency environment. The connection between what you do and what happens next is immediate and clear. You forget to lock the door is unlocked. You don't make dinner, you don't eat. Simple. Unforgiving. Real. That kind of environment builds a very specific kind of brain. One that scans ahead. One that thinks in sequences. One that's always quietly asking, if I do this, what happens next? It's not anxiety, it's calibration. And Gen X got very good at it very early. But the empty houses were only part of the story. They also watched something happen to the adults around them that no one prepared them for. The divorce rate in America nearly doubled between 1960 and 1980. Families that looked stable from the outside came apart quietly at the dinner table. And then, just as Gen X was entering the workforce, they watched companies lay off thousands of workers who had given those companies decades of loyalty. The message was loud and clear, even if no one said it out loud. Institutions will not protect you. Promises are conditional. Stability is something you build yourself, not something you inherit. So Gen X built armor, not the kind you can see. The kind that lives just under the surface. A quiet, constant readiness for things to go sideways. Psychologists call it defensive pessimism. It's not cynicism. It's not giving up. It's preparing for the worst so that when the worst arrives, you're already standing. You might have mistaken it for coldness, or distance, or a lack of enthusiasm. But here's what it actually is. It's a person who has been let down enough times to stop pretending that letdowns don't happen. And who still shows up anyway. That takes more strength than optimism ever will. Now let's talk about something that confuses a lot of people. Gen X is invisible on social media, and it's not because they don't know how to use it. They built the internet. They were early adopters of email, of chat rooms, of the web itself. They know exactly what these platforms are and how they work. They just don't want to be on them. And the reason goes back to those empty houses. When you grow up in a world where keeping a low profile is a survival skill, you develop a very specific relationship with privacy. In the world Gen X came of age in, the less people knew about your business, the safer you were. You didn't broadcast your location. You didn't share your vulnerabilities with strangers. You kept your cards close. For Gen Z, visibility is power. Being seen is being relevant. Sharing is connecting. For Gen X, exposure is risk. Showing strangers the inside of your life is not exciting. It's unnecessary. It's a door left open that didn't need to be open. This isn't fear. It's a different calculus about what safety looks like, and it was learned a long time ago in a way that went bone deep. Now here's something worth understanding about how Gen X operates at work. They don't trust institutions, but they are ferociously loyal to competence. They watched companies discard loyal employees like they were nothing, so they stopped believing in company loyalty as a concept. They don't stay somewhere because of what the company promises them. They stay because of what they can actually do there and what they're learning. And they apply the same standard to the people above them. They don't care about your title. They don't care how impressive your LinkedIn profile looks. What they want to know is, can you actually do the thing? Do you know what you're talking about when it counts? If you can, you have their respect, completely and without reservation. If you can't, no title in the world will earn it back. This isn't arrogance. It's the same logic they applied to everything else. Results are real. Everything else is noise. Now let's talk about what Gen X can do with their hands. Before Google, if you needed to know how to fix something, you figured it out. You read the manual. You called someone who knew. You tried things until one of them worked, and you remembered what worked because you had to earn that knowledge through effort and failure. Psychologists call this deeper encoding. Information that comes to you through struggle, through trial and error, through actually doing the thing, gets stored differently than information you look up in 30 seconds and forget in 5 minutes. Gen X has an entire library of deeply encoded knowledge. Practical, transferable, hard-won. They can troubleshoot without a tutorial. They can navigate without GPS. They can solve problems in environments where the tools they need don't exist yet, because they spent their formative years doing exactly that. But there's a cost to all of this, and it's worth naming honestly. Research published in the Journal of Adult Development found that Gen X is significantly less likely to seek social support when they're under stress. Not because they don't need it, but because somewhere along the way, asking for help got coded in their minds as admitting failure. They handle their crises alone. They process their hardest moments quietly. They white-knuckle through things that would be easier and healthier to share. That's the shadow side of radical self-reliance. The same muscle that kept them safe in those empty houses can become the wall that keeps other people out when connection would actually help. It's not weakness to need someone. But try telling that to the kid who learned at 8 years old that needing someone and having someone were two very different things. So where does that leave us? Gen X is the last generation that knows what it genuinely feels like to be alone with their own thoughts. Not lonely, not bored, just present with themselves in a way that didn't require a screen to fill the silence. They're the last generation that built knowledge slowly, by hand, through repetition and memory. The last generation that learned to solve problems before there was a device in their pocket to solve problems for them. They sit between two worlds. They remember the analog and they built the digital. They understand both and belong entirely to neither. Think of them like a bridge. It's strong and load-bearing and designed to connect two places that could not otherwise reach each other. Walked over constantly, rarely noticed, almost never celebrated. But without them, the gap between where we came from and where we are now would be a lot harder to cross. If you're a Gen Xer watching this, I want you to hear something directly. The quiet you keep, the self-sufficiency you wear like a second skin, the way you show up and handle things without making it anyone else's problem, that's not invisibility. That's character. Hard-built and real. And if you're someone who loves a Gen Xer or works with one or is simply trying to understand one, now you know a little more about where they came from, about why they are the way they are, about what it cost them to become that person. They earned every bit of it. If this kind of conversation speaks to something in you, this channel is where you belong. Minimal Psychology is here every week, exploring the science behind who we are and why we turned out this way. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.